Hello and welcome to Two Words Wolves Pod. I'm Ryan Eichten. With me tonight is Leo Sun. Leo, how you doing?
Hey Ryan, I'm doing good. I'm feeling well rested. I took a nice long nap since the Super Bowl on Sunday throughout that snoozer of a game. Did wake up for the half time performance, and my wife cried during it. I got emotional watching her cry during it. But yeah, it was a good little break to kind of wash that taste of what happened before that out of our mouths. But happy to be here talking about a Wolves win today.
Yeah, the football game was pretty rough, and unfortunately for the Wolves, the basketball game earlier that day was far worse. Uh, we'll talk about that. I did hear the Hawks, and I think it was Ant missed a layup at one point during the game, and the Hawks announcer referred to it as a bad bunny. So
Oh,
that was a nice little nod to that during the game as I was using the Hawks broadcast. But let's start there. We'll table the the extremely bad performances at least for a little bit. But tonight, as we're recording this late Monday night, the Wolves get a nice solid 22-point win, 138-116 against the Atlanta Hawks. I thought this was the type of performance we would have liked to seen before this, just like a team that you got outgunned from a talent perspective, and you put your foot down on them pretty much early. They're up by a few points after the first quarter, and then the second quarter, by the end of it, they're up by 25. Just like a solid performance all the way around. Ant scores 30 points. Randall has a triple double. Rudy, Jaden, and Dante score in double figures, and then we'll talk about it a little bit later. But Dosunmu has a really solid game, 21 points off the bench. Really gives the Wolves exactly what they need. Yeah, Leo, you're again. We're gonna start with the good here. We'll get into the bad of what this past few days this week has been. But what did you think about the win over the Hawks?
Yeah, it was a much needed win. I think the team needed it. I think the fan base needed it. It feels like we're on a 5 game losing streak where clearly it has not been that long of a losing streak, but it feels like that just because the vibes have been a little bit off. You've kind of lost in the same way in a lot of these games. And yeah, so I think a feel good win was really, really like necessary. And it really reminded me of how they played against the Grizzlies before they lost to the Grizzlies, where the offense kind of carried them to a win, especially early. I mean, the Wolves dropped two 40-point quarters against the Hawks today in the first and second quarters, and albeit a Hawks team that was missing one, if not two, of their main players tonight. And the game was essentially out of reach after that first half. I mean, the Hawks made a couple little runs in the third quarter and maybe a little divot into it in the fourth, but it really was never getting that much closer. It's another example. If you look at mostly that first half and maybe even a little bit of the third quarter, what this Wolves team is capable. I mean, it was the same thing of when they played. You go a little further back when they played the Cavs on the first game, similar to the Memphis series. They won the first game by a lot. It looked really easy before they dropped the next game, or even when they played Miami and they were kind of busting them up, or the Bucks. It was that type of team basketball that was going on. They're obviously shooting really well from deep, and so yeah, it's a good win. A fun little factoid. So they mentioned that the Wolves on the broadcast, Jim Peterson and Alan Horton mentioned that the Wolves scored 81 points in the first half, which was tying a franchise high for 81 points in a half of basketball. And so I went back and looked at, okay, well, how many times this happens? It actually happened 4 times, well, now 5, I think, including today. And it really took me back because there was one that I just very, very vividly remember. And it was the February 8th game. So a year and 1 day ago, or a year or 2 days ago, if you're listening to this on Monday, where the Wolves, or on Tuesday, the Wolves played the Clippers. They had just acquired Malik
Yep.
Beasley, Juancho Hernan-Gomez, and James Johnson. And they were on fire. Malik Beasley was setting 3-point records in the first half. They just absolutely shredded the Los Angeles Clippers. And they scored 81 points in the first half. And that was when we were like, man, well, Juancho Hernan-Gomez was locking down Kawhi Leonard. We're like, we really found one here. James Johnson looked like he was new age Ben Simmons out there as like a point forward. And anyways, it was just really good vibes. And so, it was kind of cool to see, like, almost 6 years later to the dot, that the Wolves had an 81-point first quarter, and it was all good vibes. So yeah, overall, really good. Impressed with a lot of things, a lot of separate players. Individual players are playing well. I don't want to bury the lead on some of those later, but I think overall it was a good shooting night, and players looked like they really, really wanted this one.
Yeah, February 2020 is the date of that game. Kind of a interesting time capsule into the NBA and the world at that point, where I don't think any of us really knew knew what was going to hit after that. Certainly, that was a really bad Wolves team that they I think the second worst team in the league, and end up with Anthony Edwards in the lottery after that. So yeah, an interesting comparison 6 years later to where the Wolves are at. Um, yeah, it's an interesting time in Wolves basketball. It's like the first full year removed from the Jimmy experience, and Trevion Graham took a few too many threes, I think, that entire season, basically.
D'Angelo Russell did not play in that game against the Clippers we had just acquired.
Yeah.
And I remember after that game, there was so much commentary on like, well, wait until we get D'Angelo Russell. Like, look how long it's been. That like we were excited for, man, once we get D'Lo, this team's going to be unstoppable. And obviously things didn't work out that way. But in one way, like Ryan was saying, it kind of did work out because we ended up losing a lot of games and we got Anthony Edwards because of how bad that team actually was in retrospect.
Yeah, I think how many games did D'Lo play that season for the Wolves before the league shut down? Like 3 or 4. I guess we could just look it up, but like it wasn't many. It was that funny. I mean, Gerson Rosas at the time was chasing that guy so hard and eventually got him, and then the whole world shuts down. Yeah, that just glad to be even in the worst of times with this current era of the Wolves team. It's so much better than that, watching that type of basketball.
Just for the record, he played 12 games with the Timberwolves halfway, and it came halfway
Really?
through the season. But yeah, just 12. Yeah, which is a little more than I thought, to be
Yeah,
honest.
I guess if the deadline's in February and the league shuts down in March, I guess, yeah, okay, that makes sense. But I mean, there would have been an All-Star break, whatever. Doesn't matter.
That's
Yeah, I
way too
think
much
this
D'Angelo
Atlanta
Russell
game.
talk for one pod.
Yeah, that's true. Dude isn't even on a team anymore. Just kind of floating in the ether between getting traded from Dallas and Washington. But yeah, I thought it was just a solid performance, in the sense of we'll talk about the previous games, but it felt like just every one of the Wolves' top 6 players was playing terribly, and in this game, pretty much all of them did. I guess the only person with a not a good game would probably be Naz Reid, who got ejected out of this game in one of the least interesting fights on an NBA slate. I wasn't watching a lot of the games tonight, but I saw that our Timberwolves old friend Isaiah Stewart kind of got into it. Will probably get suspended for a while among other players, but yeah, just a solid all around game. One that, given the current state of the Wolves, is fairly uninteresting. Unfortunately, a lot of the recent Wolves wins have been either against just teams that were bad to begin with and weren't playing half their guys. Atlanta would fall into that, kind of going back to Dallas and the Memphis a couple weeks ago, or wins against the defending champions, which they got last week against Oklahoma City. So I guess we'll talk about the inconsistency of this team in that sense, but I mean, at a certain point, I think diving too deep negatively into beating a bad Hawks team isn't really worth it. Just a solid win with no. I mean, yeah, you mentioned kind of Atlanta went on a couple runs, but it never got. I think 16 was the closest it got in the second half. Ultimately, like that's what's so frustrating about the other games, the other losses. Like, you don't even need to play well. Like, you just need to play for like a few minutes, play how good you are, and then the rest just play like meh, and you'll win the game. And I kind of thought that like that's what this was. It's like they played meh to good most of the game, and then just had an awesome stretch in the second quarter where a league goes from 5 to 25, and you can just kind of like the second half was whatever, but like you have a 25-point lead, and it's not that hard to just waste the last 24 minutes of the clock. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's you can never get those back. It's always and it's what's frustrating is that even the players themselves, Anthony Edwards even says it in the post game, after some of those losses, like, oh, these are the games that we feel like we're going to come back and regret that, we didn't win. But I mean, obviously, every team is going to have those games, and you can't go back in time as much as you want to go back and, in Interstellar through the bookstore in the locker, in the bookshelf on the locker room,
Mhm.
push over the books and tell the Wolves, no, try on defense, try on defense. Can't undo it. And so it's just kind of moving forward from here, which is, again, you don't want to ignore what has happened in the past. Again, Ryan and I will be talking about at least one of those losses. But, it's good to see them playing together. And I think it's really good to see. We'll talk about Dosunmu in a little bit later, but I mean, seeing him be able to play well in a win, because he had a bad net plus minus in the previous game, and today I think it really showed a lot more light on what he could do when given a full slate of minutes. So again, seeing him was really awesome. Seeing Bones playing well was also great. You know how good of a win this was, Ryan? Even Jalen Clark hit a 3-pointer in this game. That's how good the Wolves are playing in this game. It's going well when Jalen Clark hits a three, and so yeah, I mean, Nas got to beat up on Mo Gay for a little bit, and didn't really hurt the Wolves, which is, again, not great. You don't want that happening all the time. I think Alan Horton was mentioning how many technicals. I think Nas is inching closer to 10. I believe he is. I think he's at around 8 or so probably now. And yeah, it's one of those things where it's okay. Jaden looked mad when he was playing as well too. I felt like he was playing angry on offense. I mean, we get that stone face Jaden all the time, but it looked like he was really dunking with some force. And I think it was at one point in the third quarter, he was like aggressively going at Zachary Risache on the defensive end, where he's like picking out full court, like poke, 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 and then finally rips him once he crossed half court, and looked like he just really wanted this one too. And yeah, it's good to see Julius rewarded with a triple double. It was funny. I don't know if you noticed, Ryan, at the end when it was kind of garbage time, Julius was really hunting that 20th point. I think he really wanted that 20-point triple double so bad that he got hit in the face on a senseless Jaden 1 foot right before their last possession 3-point attempt, and Julius Randle like hustled for the rebound and tried to draw a foul, but instead got smacked in the face and took a knee for a little bit. But anyways, yeah, all's well that ends well. Ant got his 30, which he was hunting as well a little bit too. And I really love seeing that two-man game between Ant and Julius, especially in that second quarter. They had some really good chemistry going on, some great drop-offs. I think Julius had a little swaggy, like over the shoulder, behind his head, kind of pass to Ant, drop off for a three. It's cool because I think when the two of them are playing really well together like they were today, granted against a inferior opponent, it really gives you hope on how high could this offensive ceiling be for a team that quite frankly has struggled on offense, especially in earlier this weekend as well.
Yeah, it felt like their offense was just intentional versus the just completely unintentional offense they ran against the Clippers, where like they're running the proper offense, following the game plan, getting into their sets. Like you mentioned, the two-man stuff with Ant Randall, that was just completely missing. All of that just felt better, and you just hope that, I mean, they got only one more game left before the All-Star break, but you just hope that like that can be the norm. And the defense, that was probably fine to bad tonight. I don't know. It's hard to get on the defense when you're scoring so many points to begin with. But the defense before the Clippers game was terrible, and it was probably fine in the Clippers game. But like if you can combine that with a defense that has been around fifth this entire season, like that's where it's an example of how good this team can be, even against a crappy Hawks team. One player, I thought Jaden was outstanding, kind of a reminder of like this is more from last year, but like Jaden McDaniels as the barometer for the offense. When Jaden is scoring and doing well, like that's a great sign. And when he's not, things are not going well. Jaden had like 4 or 5 dunks in this game, a couple of them really nasty dunks. I think that's a good sign. And like you mentioned, playing angry is fine, but I obviously sometimes you see like the bad fouls from Jaden. We certainly saw that he's been in foul trouble recently. Kind of using that anger and aggression for good instead of for whatever it's been the past couple of games is certainly a step in the right direction.
Yeah, they're gonna have a test in front of them. I mean, they're playing the Portland Trailblazers. If you look at their record, they're not a very good team, but they're playing a Sixers team that's resting Joel Embiid tonight. But they dropped a 49-point third quarter on the Philadelphia 76ers tonight as we're recording this right now, and they're about to beat them by 30, I think. And so it's not going to be an easy game. I think the Wolves defense, as you said, certainly they played, I think, sufficient enough against who they were up against tonight. But they're going to have to play a lot harder, I think, from start to finish against the Blazers if they want to really enter the All-Star game, All-Star break on a good note.
Yep, and ultimately, you kind of don't get the full good note because of the two games we'll talk about next. But like you said, I think a lot hinges on just like if you can beat Portland, you salvage some sort of good vibes heading into the break. I think that'll be super important. But let's go backwards. Let's talk about Friday's game against New Orleans, where they lose 119-115. They're up by 18 in the first half, and they're up, 18 in the second half after being up 14 at halftime, I believe, something like that. And the game just slowly, as Finch says after the game, they kind of let go of the rope, like we often see them do, and the game just kind of slowly falls away throughout the second half. And to my eye, there was two main culprits where Ant and Julius were just not playing well enough with enough energy, especially on defense. Both of them were just playing not good enough. And that, I think, led to what Rudy Gobert said after the game, which I'll play here. He's answering a question from Dane Moore, referencing an earlier question in the presser about just lack of energy and accountability.
When you talk about accountability, as you did in the first question, are you talking about accountability in yourselves, accountability amongst yourselves?
I mean,
coaching staff?
It starts with ourselves, but it seems like we don't have that. So I think at some point, just from the coaches, I think it's not an easy position for a coach to take guys out of the game, especially when like it's not something that you want to do. But I think if the players don't show any effort, at some point we gotta. No matter how talented we are as a team, if we don't have that, we just can't be a winning team. So it starts with me. Like if I'm not showing effort, they'll take me out of the game. And everybody else got to follow. Our best players, our leaders. Like if you don't show any effort, no matter if you score 50, like you're just not gonna win. So at some point we're not mature enough to have that accountability ourselves. That might be the solution. And I guarantee you that when we come back on the court, we show effort.
Yeah, so I thought that was a really important clip from Rudy. Just kind of, there's been a lot of talk about it online. Obviously, I think both of us have seen that, just the reaction to it. I've been kind of surprised that people took that more as a shot at Finch than I thought. It was far more a shot at Ant and Julius and their play, and more of a call to action to Finch of being like, hey, like we can't keep doing this way. Like we need to change something up. And I do think part of it is like when they talk about accountability or who closes down the stretch, right? Sometimes Rudy in the past, like they've sat him down the stretch of the games because like he hasn't been effective enough. I mean, like the game they lost to Memphis, Rudy didn't play down the stretch of that game. But like I think on the flip side, how many times have they sat Julius in the same spot where Julius is not playing well? I can't really remember. It feels like Julius, as much as Ant, is like locked into the closing lineup. So I think it's probably less about like Rudy's, if there's like any personal frustration between the two of them, but just more like it feels like, I'm sure part of him feels like he's the only one or the main person that deals with that accountability. And clearly he felt like other people both weren't giving the proper effort, specifically Ant and Julius, and two, that like there isn't accountability for those guys as much as there is for him and obviously guys lower down the roster. But the next day at practice, Finch responded to that after a reporter asked him about what Rudy said in the locker room. So I'll play that here as well.
Yeah, well aware of his comments. Say a couple things. One is, and anybody knows how we do things here, knows there's a high degree of accountability. Secondly, I handle all my conversations with ourselves in house. Disappointing that he felt the need to go outside. But nonetheless, that's been addressed already today. There's never been a team that's won anything meaningful that has substituted their way there.
All right. right. So two key aspects of what Finch said there. First one, which is that he would have ideally liked Rudy to keep that in house. Not as much. I think it was that part of it was less as much criticizing what Rudy said and more just like this when you're calling out other people. That's fair to do, but like that kind of thing has got to stay in house and not be out to the media. Which, as a media member, I guess I disagree in the sense of like I'm never going to tell a guy don't share your thoughts to us. It's helpful to us, but like from a pure basketball sense and for the coach of the team, you certainly get it. And then the other one, which I find equally as interesting, is like he said, I'll paraphrase, like you don't substitute your way to a championship, or you don't substitute your way to high level winning. And I agree and disagree, and I'll get your thoughts as well on both points. Not substituting your way to championship. I kind of think this is like a chicken and the egg thing. Winning teams don't substitute their way to the championship because they have the roster that they don't need to do that. That winning teams have the top guys that don't need to be taken out of the game because of effort, because they show the effort consistently. Versus, I think Finch is right there, but I think in the sense that he's wrong that like that. I think this specific group of guys does need that type of accountability. And it just kind of, it's like a signal to me of like, maybe either this roster isn't ready or it doesn't fit well enough or whatever. I don't know. I'm kind of dealing with like the chicken or the egg thing. Like, do good teams not yank their starters out because they're good teams, or do you not yank your starters because that just leads to more problems than it solves? I don't know. What are your thoughts on like both keeping it in house and the quote good teams don't yank around their players?
Yeah, I mean, I hear you, and I hear a lot of the fan base as well too, and so I do get it. There is a little bit of a like, it comes off a little bit defensive on Finch's side, and with Rudy, I think if anything, the fans needed to hear that from a player. It's something where I think Ant and Julius have kind of mentioned it sometimes, but I mean, they're the ones that, like you said, tend to be the worst offenders of not playing with consistent defensive energy, and so it doesn't really mean as much. And so when you hear it coming from Rudy and trying to keep someone accountable for it, that's good. And I think as fans, we want to hear it. But I would say personally for myself, right, I'm kind of with Finch on this one. I think as fans, we see so little of what happens really within the team, within a pro basketball team all the time. All we see are just the games. We see the media availability. I mean, you and I, we see the team in the locker room a little bit. We see some shoot around. We see some of the interactions, but that's really about it. We don't see the majority of what else happens. And so Jim Peterson went on, I don't want to say a rant, but he went on a little diatribe today in the Hawks game where he was talking about like, people got to give Finch a little bit more credit and a little bit more belief, and that, all the things that he's done since he's gotten here and he's continuing to do with the team, like we owe him a little bit more trust and to be like, hey, like, it's all on him. I'm not saying that Finch is invincible. He shouldn't be blameless for any of it. But I do believe that like if we were under 500 and we're still spamming the same buttons and levers, then, sure. Like, I think, we could, I would feel a little bit more harder on like, yeah, no, Finch, so something's got to change on this. You got to, pull Julius, and you got to pull. Yeah. I mean, trust me. I mean, I'm on here during games and I'm posting screenshots of what's happening in the game, like going back and on DVR, League Pass, screenshotting like, what is Ant doing right here? Or why is Julius triple teaming Bones Highland after he crosses half court when he has the ball? Things like this, right? So I'm critical of them. So I'm not saying that they deserve a pass or that Rudy's wrong. I just think that this is just another example of them navigating through a rough patch, as we've seen them do for, over a year now, and even past that when, they were kind of figuring it out with Cat, before Rudy was there as well too. I mean, they're all trying to figure it out, and I think that yes, it is frustrating. I wish that sometimes I would like to see him pulled, but I think that's when I kind of go back and think about like, well, there's a reason I'm not an NBA coach, and there's not a reason that I'm like further behind in terms of like, understanding like the further nuances of like Finch also has to navigate these egos, right? It's easy for us to say, pull Julius and put him on the bench and like, sit him for a game even, or whatever the case is. But like, what does that do on a larger scale, like macro level? Does this really, disrupt the balance of things? Does this like, we don't have to deal with those repercussions. We feel like, oh, well, these basketball players are just robots and they should play well. If they're not playing well, they shouldn't play, and that's it. And they should understand they're not playing well, so someone else, should get those minutes, and they should be happy that the team's winning even if they're not playing. But the reality is, that's not what it is. And being a coach, especially in the NBA, is about navigating those egos, because every player is capable of playing the right way. Every player is capable of doing, things that 99% of the world cannot do. And these NBA coaches have a really hard task. So that's why I'm giving him a little bit more credence on that side. But again, I still do understand the frustrations that it could be when you're watching Julius stand around and not defensively rebound the ball, or watch a guy cut right behind him, or even cut right in front of him. That's so frustrating, because we see what Ant could do. We even see what Julius could do sometimes when he's really locked in isolation, point of attack. Like we saw him D up Luka Doncic in a way that I haven't seen Luka get D'd up in a long time during the playoff series last season. So we know he can do it, and I think he's just as guilty as Ant as not trying against these dog days of January games against nobody teams that are hurt.
Yeah, I think Rudy has a point for sure that the two main stars of the team, and he didn't call them out by name, but to me, that's what he was talking about, is the two main stars of the team, Ant and Julius, need to have far more consistency night to night, and can't have performances like down the stretch against New Orleans or the next game against the Clippers. Like the Wolves, especially in the regular season, it is their biggest flaw, is that these two guys and the rest of the roster, to be fair, but it starts with the top two guys, and maybe I kind of more gravitate towards Ant. Is just like this is the guy that, I said before the season, I thought for the Wolves to win the championship, they needed Ant to be closer to an MVP candidate and a surefire first team All NBA guy than where he was the past couple of years. And to be honest, he's been better than the years past, but not MVP candidate, automatic first team All NBA selection type guy. So I kind of gravitate towards that. That's as big of a thing as any, why they've underachieved this regular season. So I think Rudy certainly has a point that that needs to change. And before the Wolves can really do it, to Finch's point of you don't substitute your way to a champion, to a good teams don't substitute their way to winning. I fully understand that. And I agree. I totally agree. My point on top of that would be but your guys need you to yank them at times. I agree. I agree that yanking them doesn't actually solve anything, but that doesn't mean that there's still an underlying issue. If that makes sense, what I'm trying to get at, that you still need to find a way to fix that underlying issue that's been there for a couple seasons now, where the Wolves' low performances are just flatly worse than the worst performances from the Thunder, the Nuggets, the Rockets, those type of teams that the Wolves are trying to beat and be better than. The Wolves just have a lower gear at times. Every team has bad nights, but the Wolves' worst is the worst out of that group of teams. So that needs to be fixed somewhere along the way. And so I agree with Rudy there. Is it the best to call out the guys in the media? Probably not. But I think when we talk about we don't know what's going on in the locker room, maybe that applies here too. Maybe he has. I'm sure we all have felt like I've gone through the proper channels on X thing at work and it's not working. So maybe I skipped the chain of command or whatever. It's obviously that's not the right thing to do, but maybe you've run out of rope. I don't know. But I think it's understandable of Finch to say no, this is something we deal with in-house. Yeah, so I think no one is fully in the wrong, certainly what they've said after the game. And so my biggest thing kind of comes back to, they just need Ant and Julius to play more consistently. That's that is the first thing. And it's not to say Rudy can play better and should play better in XYZ areas. Certainly Jaden and Dante the past couple games have been really, really poor, not including the Hawks game where they played better. Nas has been having bad stretches as well. So it's not to say Ant and Julius are the only issues going on, but I just think when it comes down to it, when your top two offensive guys don't play with the same effort and energy night to night when it's against these different teams, we see it against, go back, watch the last Oklahoma City game. the defensive intensity and effort in that game is just night and day from what we've seen recently. Like that has to be. You're not going to give an A+ effort every single night. Of course not. There's too many games for that. But like it has to be just. It has to be closer to even every other night, because that's what other teams do. Oklahoma City, San Antonio, Denver, Houston. Maybe not. Houston kind of is closer to the boat of the Wolves in terms of these type of performances, but like other teams don't have as often as these low lows. And I personally think like that's important if the Wolves are going to win multiple playoff series.
Yeah, I mean, I was getting into it with some people, not getting into it, just a little back and forth with people, respectful back and forth on Blue Sky with people about where the team is and the makeup of the team and Finch and all that stuff. And, I'll categorize myself definitely more as like a Finch defender. I do feel that similar to every team and every player where it's like, oh man, you watch your team so much, you're like, oh, Julius is so bad at this, or Ant always does this, or, Dante's always this or whatever. And you kind of don't see what happens with the other teams. You think that the Thunder are just this perfect organization, or the Nuggets, like all their players are just like perfect. Like none of them make those mistakes. I think it's the same with the coaches where it's like, yeah, Finch has some issues with maybe he doesn't sub out Julius for, we don't know, but just say fear of, rocking the boat too much and, messing up the starters or whatever like that. Maybe that's kind of one of his flaws, but like, the grass is always greener on the other side, right? Where it's like, oh, well, what if we had, Mike Malone as our coach, or what if we had, Mike Budenholzer as our coach? Like there's different other things that other coaches are going to be poor at. And so I think it's, fair to criticize Finch about some things, but also not jump, the whole ship and just be like, all right, you know what? Like it's over. We got to get rid of him. Finch is the problem. Like, no, I think honestly, it's a little bit more the mental makeup of the team. And, no team is perfect. There's like our team plays down and then they also play up. Some teams don't play down and some teams don't play up either. So, I think there is a sliding scale of that, and just understanding and it's very frustrating. Trust me. I mean, no one's mood is ruined as much as mine is sometimes. I mean, you asked my wife before the Super Bowl. I damn near ruined our little Super Bowl get together because I was so sour about the Clippers loss, and so I care deeply about it. So I'm not just like, oh, well, who cares? I was like, no, I care. But also just not getting way too over emotional about, a poor stretch that they've had, because, they've done it and they've bounced back. And hopefully this is just one of those bad stretches that will get them into shape of where they need to be. Again, that's maybe wishful thinking or I'm huffing that hopium, but I still believe.
Yeah, I agree with like the idea that like every team has stretches like this or games like this and all that. I also think that like the Wolves just have them more often or worse than other championship contenders. I think it's like it's a nuanced thing where it's like was that just a normal bad game? Was that a Wolves-esque bad? I don't know. I'm just saying like I do believe that it's like a bigger problem than other teams have, and it's not just me saying that. I feel like the players and the coaches to a certain extent agree with that. I think like national media, I've heard that like on different podcasts or different tweets or whatever. So it is something that I think like every team has flaws, and that's one that the Wolves need to like address and get better. And I think a good example of this would be like, I don't know, we already mentioned this. We're not in the locker room, but it does feel like there is some like just something's off, right? I think like that can be said. We certainly don't know now and may never know like what specifically is going on, and maybe there's not something specifically going on. Maybe this team has just been around each other for like 3 straight months and it's just kind of tired of each other, which hopefully the All-Star break can solve, right? But I thought their response to another bad Pelicans loss against the Clippers was certainly the low point of the season, and concerning in the sense of like you got players and coaches snipping at each other in the media basically, and I'm sure they talked it, and they did talk it out behind the scenes as well. But like to follow that up with just an excruciating effort against the Clippers is just at best just a bad look, and at worst sign of where this team is at. They just get absolutely blown off the doors by the Clippers. I will say Kawhi Leonard was awesome in that game. Incredibly good.
Yeah.
I was listening to Zach Lowe and they described him as he's been the best player in the NBA since Thanksgiving. Certainly the game we saw on Super Bowl Sunday backed that up. So there's that. But like, I think about like something that I've gotten frustrated with is like this idea like, okay, well, they don't get up for good teams. Well, it's a matinee game, so they're not going to get up for that. And it's just like, okay, but like, if we're going to give excuses for all these games, they're running out of games,
Yeah.
like, and like they lost to Zion kicked their butt, Kawhi kicked their butt. If you're not getting up for Zion and Kawhi, like, again, you're running out of games. Like, where is the, like, a 2-time finals MVP just came into your building and whooped you. Like, there's not any sense of, I don't know. I get that I'm as tired of as anyone else is talking about like effort and all that type of stuff, but like clearly that's a big issue with this team. And I hate that but like they're the ones saying it as much as like the fans and the media are talking about it. It's something that like they just do not play consistent enough night to night. And I think I've always felt like it's a big issue, one that can and will be probably solved at some point in this Anthony Edwards Wolves era. But like, it's just too far, like the gap between their best game and their worst game, and clearly like the level the opponent dictates which of those you're going to get. There has to be like a bigger level of care about the regular season than there is. I mean, just look at the standings. There's no reason they should be behind the Lakers. There's no reason they should be behind the Rockets, and there's no reason they should be behind the Nuggets. All of those teams have been far more injured than the Wolves, or just more in like the Lakers case, the Wolves are just better than that team. And the Wolves have been one of the healthier teams in the Western Conference, if not the most healthy, even not the healthiest team in the Western Conference. Like, there just has to be like a more give a shit about the regular season than there's been. And the Clippers loss was just, and again, a lot of teams would look poor on Super Bowl Sunday against a Clippers team that is kind of desperate, like trade deadline, all that. Like, a lot of times in this stretch of the pre All-Star break, post trade deadline, like there's gonna be wonky scores, right? There's gonna be games that don't necessarily reflect good or bad on a team. So I think that's fair to point out.
Yep.
Like, just the timing of, I thought it was the worst performance of the year for the Wolves, this Clippers game by far. Like, their offense was just nothing. They were not running anything. They were just jogging up, turning the ball over, taking the first half decent shot they saw. It was concerning. In like I mentioned, it came in a part of the season that for a lot of teams have these concerning efforts, but like, considering it came after a New Orleans game that was like at the time felt like the low point of the season. I don't know.
Yeah.
You just hope that this Clippers game is actually the low point of the season. Because if it's not, hoo boy.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think like, and it's a rhetorical question, but it's like, would you rather be a team that can beat themselves or a team that like can't beat some of like their biggest fears or their biggest weakness is beating other teams, right? Where it's like the Wolves seem to have that capability where they can beat anybody. They can beat anybody. You know, I don't think there's any question about it. It's just that they beat themselves, and so it's like it's on razor's edge of like where they kind of walk that fine line, and it's as far as you mentioned earlier about the whole Rudy thing and the back and forth of the coaching staff. I mean, look, Rudy Gobert is a player that everyone knows is not like universally loved, right? For better or worse, for warranted or not. He is a guy that his own teammate on the Timberwolves punched him in the middle of a game during a timeout. He has potentially the whatever personality, characteristic, whatever you want to say, to kind of grate on even some of his own teammates. And I wouldn't be surprised if Julius is getting annoyed or Ant's getting annoyed or whoever's getting annoyed with him. And now in this staff, maybe the coach is getting annoyed with him as well too. That's just kind of who Rudy is. But at the same time, I hate to say it, but it's kind of like a Dylan Brooks, maybe a Patrick Beverly, a Draymond Green even, where it's like, Draymond Green's out here punching his own teammates, but at the same time, the majority of his teammates, or at least the ones that have been around him for a long time, would vouch for him. Like, hey, he's the one, like, yeah, he's really grading. We get really sick of maybe his antics sometimes, but like he's doing it for the better. Like he's trying to, get us to where we need to go. And yes, throughout the course of an 82-game season, it could be a lot. I'm sure Steve Kerr is kind of sick of it sometimes too. The Grizzlies obviously got way too sick of it with Dylan Brooks when he was there, but you see how they've done once he left there as well too. So all that to say is that, yeah, it is frustrating. It is a concerning loss. I'm not saying that, hey, just, treat this as, whatever, like don't even think about it. But I wouldn't say, to me personally, I don't think it's the worst loss of the season. It's definitely up there. I mean, like you said, Kawhi, I mean, shoot, my brother was, over for the Super Bowl. And again, if you're the first time listening to this, he's a very casual fan, but he watched Kawhi Leonard shoot the shot where he goes up with one hand for like a mid-range jump shot, and he switches it to his left hand, and then he switches it back to his right hand, and he shoots a jumper, and it goes in. And it's kind of crazy. I mean, like, Kawhi was on one, and I've watched enough Clippers games to know he's been playing really at a high level. But losing to a Kawhi supernova, isn't that bad of a loss. But again, I do agree, it wasn't just him playing well. That's why they lost. The Wolves are really bad on both ends of the court. I don't need to go back and to relitigate this, but I think the Brooklyn loss earlier in the season is probably still one of the worst ones. I mean, you're facing Michael Porter Jr. and a guy who his own team just cut him. Just straight cut him, didn't want him on the team anymore, who was playing his first game after a 20-game absence and scored 30 points against you. I mean, I think that was probably one of the worst losses this season for me. But yeah, I mean, it's behind us now, and you try to learn from it, and you hope that they're learning from it. But at the end of the day, they got to move forward, and they move forward today, and so it's good to get that win.
Yeah, something I've said about the Wolves, and I think it's just true at this point, is like this is true of every team, but it's especially true about the Wolves, is they're never as good as their positive stretches look, and they're certainly not as bad as their negative stretches look. And the Wolves have had a knack of, whenever you feel like they're toast, they're done, they're going to fall apart now. Every single time they turn it around and start rattling enough wins. It's basically been 4 straight years of that. As much as the same way we complain about like this effort stuff, as consistently frustrating as that has been, they've consistently dug themselves out of it. Where that kind of, so with that said, I do believe the Wolves will certainly win enough games to be the 6th seed, and maybe even kind of go on a similar run that they did last year. And if they were to do that, given they're a couple games ahead of last year's pace, like they could be, given the injuries above them, they could still like sneak into the top 3. Like that's still, it's a more difficult path than it should be, but like that's still in front of them.
There's a lot of season left. Yeah, there's a lot.
My issue is, and especially if you compare them to last season, is they weren't good enough last year. They weren't good enough 2 years ago. They needed to be better than those teams by at least like a solid margin. And through 55 games, they have not. They're pretty on par with, which is, again, they made the West Finals. They're pretty on par with where they were last year. That's kind of how I feel. And so that's good in a lot of ways. But I think it's not that the Wolves are championship or bust. It's that the Wolves, like, that should be their goal coming into every year, is to win the championship. And I think through a lot of things can change in the next couple of months. Through 55 games, they just have not been good enough. They're not, at this point in the season, they really haven't played consistently well for more than a few games all year. But through 55 games, this current version of the team right this second is not good enough to win three playoff series in a row. Can that change? Certainly. Will the Wolves start to play better at some point? Almost certainly. I'm already at the point where I'm beginning to worry about like their championship ceiling, if that even exists. And I like you, I'm kind of more of a Finch defender, but like the Clippers performance was the first time that I kind of felt like maybe Finch will not be the coach of this Timberwolves team past this season. And it's not to think that I think the Wolves are like actively thinking about that. It's more just like at a certain, like if this continues in this direction, which again, I don't believe it will, if this continues in this direction, it's the type of season that gets a coach fired, is maybe how I would put it. And I certainly with the effort stuff, I put that on the players. Like if you kind of similar to the yanking people out, if you need your coach as an NBA player to like hype you up for bad teams or at any point, I think that's on the players. So that part of, if you want to talk about rotations and schemings, like that's where I think the fair criticisms of Finch lie. With the pumping players up or whatever, I don't think that's on him. But like ultimately, like even if it's not his fault or if it's unfair, if a specific issue is within the team for multiple seasons, at a certain level, that is on the coach. But I'm for sure in the boat that like firing him mid-season would be incredibly would be far more harmful than anything else. And like comparing them to the Nuggets of last year where they let go of Malone, I don't think the Wolves inside the locker room or whatever are close to like that sort of thing. I'm more just like, again, I don't think his job should be on the hot seat or whatever, and it certainly I don't think it is. But it was just the first time that I began to wonder, like, what would a post Finch team look like?
Yeah, I think, the last thing I'll say about this is I think Tim Connolly is very, very good at his job, in my opinion. Of all the president of basketball operations and GMs that the Wolves have had, Gerson Rosas even included, I think Tim Connolly is, one of the best that we have. And I trust that if he believes that Finch is the right coach for the job, he'll keep him. We don't have a Kings-esque situation here or a Phoenix Suns-esque situation here where he's just doing the bidding of the owners and A-Rod and Mark Lowry. Like he's going to do what he thinks is best for the team. And so I understand that oftentimes the coach is the first to go. And I do think that Finch has ways that he can improve. I'm not going to say that I know what those ways are, but I do think that it can get better, but it most certainly can get worse. And like you said, I think firing like mid-season would be a terrible idea. I don't think that's on the block, but I think similar to on the inverse side of it, you said, that game on Sunday when they lost to the Clippers seemed like a game, one of the first games you felt like, oh, maybe Finch isn't going to be the guy who's coaching the Wolves if and when they win the championship. I think it's the same thing as you can look at that Thunder game when on the other side, like when Finch gets thrown out in the first quarter of the game and he pumps up his team so much that they have an epic win against the reigning champs. I mean, that's what I'm like, dude, that's a coach I could see leading a team to a championship. And again, there's going to be those ebbs and flows throughout the season. But we're out here after that game. Other fan bases are praising Chris Finch for saving the NBA because the Thunder kind of started losing some more games after that because they weren't getting the same foul calls as before. So anyways, yeah, it is what it is. I'm happy he's still the coach right now. I want to give him at least, this season, if not more still, to kind of see where they could really go. I think we all knew going into the season that the Wolves were not championship favorites by any means. So if they don't win a championship, I don't think it's like, oh, well, Finch didn't get them there. I mean, we just know the makeup of the team is, probably a second round, hopefully, conference finals team again. And if we really, really get lucky, maybe we'll make the finals, but, we'll see from there.
Yeah. And I think to the championship point, it's not that there are certainly a lot of ways the season can end where you consider it positive and it doesn't end in a championship. What I would say is through 55 games, we are not headed toward this team is not headed towards that outcome. We're through 55 games, again, taking a snapshot, taking pictures. Right this second, they're not on that trajectory. They're headed towards a season that is underwhelming. I mean, right this second, their most likely outcome would be losing in the first round. Like they're the 6th seed. They'd play, I don't have the standings up in front of me, but I think Denver, they wouldn't be favored in that series. And ultimately, there's still 30 plus games left. And last season, we would have said this exact same thing. And I think they did have a successful season. And do I think they could beat? I mean, we already mentioned it. Like they can beat anyone. So, yeah, it's just I'm more like kind of trying to think of where snapshot wise where they are right this second, and right this second through 55 games they just haven't been good enough. But it's kind of at this point pretty obvious on that fact. I think they're under 50 win pace. That's certainly that's the first thing that needs to come is win 50 games. It's hard to imagine any team winning a championship with 49 wins. But let's move on to Apex Alpha. Leo, who is your leader of the pack this week?
Let me think. Was there any Timberwolves player that stood out to me in recent memory? Oh, yes. Mr. Johnny Juzang is my Apex Alpha this week. He's been active for now 49 of his max 50 games of eligibility on two-way contracts. So that's probably why we haven't seen him ever since his explosion recently against the Pelicans. Was game 49 worth it for him playing that 49th out of 50th game. He had what we like to call hashtag the block. If you're a new Timberwolves fan, this will forever be known as the block, where Johnny Juzang went up in transition and stopped Trey Murphy III on his way up in transition. Huge block, got the bench off their feet, celebrating as they called a timeout after they scored on the other end. And shortly after that, in the second quarter, He hits a three to give Minnesota the first double-digit lead of the game, which, of course, we know they later pissed away. But during that 5-minute stint, he was a +9. He was a huge reason the Wolves went up so much in the beginning. And then he played a very shorter stint in third quarter, really didn't do as much. I think he missed a couple shots. But he was tied still at the end of the game for a team-high +3 in a loss against the Pelicans. And again, I just want to give him his flowers. It's really hard for these guys who are really, like, for all intents and purposes, they're crawling, like, and they're scraping and they're begging for their NBA careers to continue. Johnny Juzang is approaching his mid-20s now. He is not a guy that teams would be like, oh, we're gonna trade for you and give you a huge role. He's already kind of done well when he was with the Utah Jazz previous to this season in a minor role. And so again, I'm not saying that Johnny Juzang is the next coming, but it was really cool to see him kind of get his moment. And who knows? I mean, the rumor has it right now is that Mike Conley should be returning probably somewhere after the All-Star break on a minimum contract, and then the Wolves have one more spot. Who knows what they do with it? Maybe they upgrade Johnny Juzang, or maybe they find someone else. Personal reasons, hope they pick up Johnny Juzang for the season to have another active shooter out there. I know the buyout market's always kind of slim, and you're never looking at buyout guys to be saviors of the team. But yeah, it was really cool to see Johnny Juzang, get his moment of, glory right there. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed it as well too, Ryan. I know you were thinking of me when you saw Johnny out there on the court.
Absolutely. It was a fun game. Unfortunately, they weren't able to bring that Pelicans game home where he had that nice performance. And I do think it'll be interesting to see where the buyout market stands. And I think a lot of us have kind of come to the realization that the buyout market doesn't usually bring a lot of quality talent. I mean, there's a reason like guys get cut in mid-February. Yeah, the reports are that Mike will be coming back. The reason why they haven't signed him yet is because the Wolves are $1.5 million below this first apron. There's incentive to stay below that. They have 2 open roster spots. If they were to sign someone today, I don't have the graph in front of me, but like the prorated so the league minimum is like 2.2 million or 2.4. And so when you sign a guy mid-season, the minimum goes down each day, right? So if there's 200 days in the season or whatever it is, and you sign a guy with 1 day left, you can play 1/200th of the minimum. So however many days are left, if you signed a guy right now, it'd be about 800,000. So remember, the Wolves are $1.5 million. So if they were to sign 2 people right now, that would throw them over the first apron, which doesn't really make sense when you can just wait until after the All-Star break, when that per day gets down to 750,000 or below, which that date is somewhere in the All-Star break. So sometime during the All-Star break, they'll sign Mike Conley to roughly about 750,000. I believe how that works is because he was traded to and cut by Charlotte, they are paying his salary. And then that basically when a guy gets bought out, the team, like Charlotte in Mike's case, will be off the hook for that last $750,000. Mike doesn't make any more or less money signing. So if Mike decides he wants to retire, he'll make, which it doesn't sound like is the case. Mike will sign here, and then like you mentioned, the Wolves do have one more roster spot. It'll be interesting if they go after some sort of player in the buyout market. We don't know who's getting cut. Like I saw like Nick Batum. I don't know. Why would the Clippers cut him? He's still like they're going to be in. I don't know if the Clippers are probably going to make the playoffs. It's going to come down. I mean, like the current top six plus Phoenix at 7 are almost locks for the playoffs. And then 8 is going to be Golden State, Portland, or the Clippers. I take your pick there, but like, I don't know. The Clippers got a good shot. Why would they cut him? Kyle Anderson. Does Memphis want to let go of him? I don't know. I think Johnny Juzang makes as much sense as anyone to take up that 15th roster spot, given that they won't be able to basically play him the rest of the season on his 2-way. And again, it's the 15th roster spot. But for now, through the All-Star break, the Wolves don't really have the cap money to facilitate that, which I think is fine. Mike's probably just enjoying his extra time off here. Honestly, he probably flew home from where were they? Toronto or Memphis. Probably just flew home and has been chilling with his family ever since then. My Apex Alpha, Dosunmu, was awesome in the Hawks game tonight. 21 points off the bench, 9 of 13 shooting, and just gave the Wolves exactly what this team has been longing for this entire season. Another bench scorer that you aren't relying on. Nas Bones had a nice night too. I think the rotation makes a lot of sense right now, where you're playing basically 8 guys and maybe a half guy. Jalen Clark got a few minutes, and like you mentioned, knocked down a 3. We always would like to see Berenger get a little bit more time, but like the core 8 guys of the starting 5 plus Nas, Io, and Bones, I think makes a lot of sense. And they ran if you're going to play Io and Bones both off the bench, you're going to probably play a little bit more 3-guard lineups. They use a little bit more of that, and I think Io and Ant, if you're playing those lineups, like are kind of more one of those two or both of those two can guard kind of more wing players. So I think that like that will work out as like a 3-guard lineup. But I just the Wolves have just needed another scorer off the bench. And his speed and burst to the rim have obviously been impressive, and we knew that coming in, but pushing the pace as well, especially like with a bench unit that might not have like Ant or Julius out there as like your offensive engines, just getting out, running with pace. Both him and Bones, I think, have done a good job at that. So yeah, I've been impressed just 2 games in with Io, and I think he's going to be a perfect fit, and one that, like we talked about all the effort crap or whatever as like the biggest weakness. Like schematically, the bench was the Wolves' biggest weakness, and they can paper that over it. They can paper over that. Like I'm not sure like the next biggest flaws are like stuff like that can't be fixed until the offseason with however you like, or just like Rudy and Julius's games and how they fit with Ant and all that. It was the biggest red flag with the Wolves, and I thought Tim Connolly did a good job fixing that for a relatively low price.
Yeah, I love that you picked Io and we get time to talk about him. I think we've been itching to talk about him all episode here so far. Like you said, it literally only took 2 games for us to see everything that he brings. I mean, the excellent point of attack defense. I mean, he's in that game against the Clippers, he's diving on the floor, getting a loose ball, after a deflection. He's scoring tough driving layups, and it looks like he's playing on like 1.5 speed sometimes when he kind of just like first step, just right by the defender and then going straight up to the rim. And today, yeah, I mean, he was amazing today. I mean, like you said, that burst off the dribble. And I want to say that transition play, not even just his speed to finish, but his speed to get his teammates involved. I mean, how often have we seen a botched Timberwolves fast break where Dante's going full force, 100 miles an hour down the court with the ball, and he jumps up in the air and he like throws it backwards behind him to a guy where he's like, what's going on? Like, what is this? And Io was so great in transition. I mean, he had 2 really great running at full speed and on time, on target bounce pass drop offs back to Jaden, who just slammed them in, with one hand. He's just so smart the way that he plays, and like the way that I kind of saw him today. It kind of dawned on me. I mean, he's a Chicago guy. The Wolves already have a Chicago guy on their team in Terrence Shannon Jr. And I feel like Io is like that fully evolved form, or at least next evolved form of what we hope Terrence Shannon would be, except he has a better, more reliable 3-point shot by a mile. He's a better point of attack defender. And obviously TJ's maybe, I think, a little heftier than him. Maybe they're about the same length. And TJ's probably a little bit more athletic in terms of just like, finishing at the rim, but I was just so much more crafty. He's maybe a little bit quick twitch faster, just kind of getting off the ground a little bit, and he could probably use more than just one hand that TJ unfortunately still only has right now. So yeah, I think, if TJ comes back, it means that Finch have a hell of a time, trying to find opportunity for both of those guys. In an ideal world, yeah, TJ tears it up in Iowa, and he comes back as the old TJ that remember him to be. He comes out of that hyperbolic time chamber like in Dragon Ball, with all trained up in Iowa. I see he has a new hairstyle already, and so maybe Io and him, they could kind of be the Bulldogs off the bench in that way that we hope that Clark could have been. But yeah, I love seeing Io out there. I posted on Blue Sky as well too, that we lost a Leonard, a guy that has my first name in his name, but then we picked up Dosunmu, who has my last name Sun in it. And so seeing him run up and down the jersey with Sun right in the middle of his jersey, it was pretty cool for me to be like, man, maybe he's not an Asian guy with last name Sun, but he's got my last name in it. He's rocking those Black Tree jerseys. So yeah, definitely shout out to Io. He was the truth today for sure.
Yeah, it'll be fun to watch him. Obviously, kind of a rude entrance to Timberwolves land, where they're kind of in the dog days of their season coming in, but maybe he can help them out, or maybe he can dig them out of it. And at least for one game, I thought I thought he was spectacular. Maybe like their second best player out there. That's not fair to Julius, but yeah, he was awesome off the bench, and I think your Shannon comparison is apt. Is that that this is, and it's not to compare the two, but like just with Shannon injured, like this is the type of player they needed, and he, at least for one night, and I think you can count on it, and the 3-point shot as well. He's been knocking it down all season. That'll be important too, because you got to play a space with the rest of the Wolves got. Let's move on to prey of the week. I just put themselves. They made themselves their prey. I feel like I've used this before, but the Wolves just got to get out of their own way. A lot of the time, they are their own worst enemy. All the cliches they want to use. Yeah, that's who they made their prey this week. Leo, who you got?
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Kind of similar. I mean, you're saying the Timberwolves, they're their own prey. I would say Timberwolves fans were their own prey. And so for my prey of the week is Giannis hopefuls, including myself. This whole time we were buying into all these rumors during trade deadline that the Wolves are in the lead. They're one of only 2 teams left. And, Giannis likes Minnesota, and that's the only reason they're being considered. And all this hype just to find out at the end of the day, well, Milwaukee really wasn't interested in trading him, and we weren't really that close. And the ultimate kick in the balls at the end is that Giannis announcing, "Hey, I'm now investing into Kalshi, the betting site where you can literally bet on whether or not Giannis is going to get traded or not." And so I think it was all just a big ploy, and we just kind of fell prey to it because we and I say we as in myself believed that Giannis was a reality, and who knows, maybe that'll come back in summer. But I know that when we kind of look back at it, it was all just a sham. This trade deadline, unfortunately.
Yeah, I did do some talking around, some digging on that. I do believe that like the Wolves, they were always kind of hesitant into believing that like the Bucks would do it. But I do think they had real discussions, that they came close, that if the Bucks and Giannis both decided that like it was time to part ways, I do think Giannis would be here. I think the Wolves had the best offer at that point. But I just don't think that. I think for the Bucks to have traded him, Giannis was going to have to push his way out, and he's just not at this point, or maybe ever, willing to do that. And that's both of their sides' prerogative. So it's hard to get on either side too hard. But yeah, the Kalshi stuff I just think is gross. Even if it's obviously like on the surface, like just it looks terrible, and I'm not even sure like from like the NBA's PR side if it even matters, if it's like the nefarious stuff is real. Like it's just you can't have a player involved with these prediction markets. Like there's just rife for insider trading. I mean, what I was looking at that market because I thought it was interesting, and like what would have stopped Giannis from throwing a bunch of money? It was 50-50 whether he was going to leave, according to this Kalshi market. What would have stopped him from throwing a bunch of money on him staying in Milwaukee? He could have made an easy buck there. So I would just tell people, like, don't spend your money on these sites. I know they look, it's one thing to even throw, I mean, I'm in Arizona right now where it's legal. It's one thing to take your $20 and throw it on. I know I threw a Super Bowl bet out there because it's fun to do that, but like, I mean, any gambling, don't gamble money you're not willing to lose, obviously, but like these prediction markets are even more predatory than like a simple sports bet, which is already kind of rife with like the house edge or whatever. But like when you add insider trading on top of it is just brutal. So yeah. A bummer to see anyone kind of involved with that.
Well, Ryan, I think now's a good time to actually take a quick ad break. We're excited to announce our new sponsors, BetMGM. No, I'm just kidding. No, we do not have that type of traction yet. But yeah, we're definitely not a pro betting podcast over here. If you are, that's great for you. But Ryan and myself, we got mortgage to pay, so we're staying away from that stuff. And yeah, it is. I think we both agree that it is a very bad look. At minimum, is a bad look. And it's like, is it worth it for the quick payday? Look, I like Giannis as a person, and I'm all for him getting a quick buck. But there's a lot more other ways to do it than like this, for sure.
Yeah, and I guess I'm making a distinction here between the sports gambling, which I think has certainly, like, again, if you're gambling $20, even $50, $100, like whatever, like enjoy it. If it's a hobby for yourself, that's completely fine. I do it occasionally when I'm in a legal state, but like I making a distinction with these prediction markets, like they're extraordinarily predatory in the way that I think you get worse odds, one, like because they have sports betting on there too. Like you just don't, like the house edge is bigger. But like the insider trading stuff is, I mean, you're betting on, like you see people betting on politics or foreign relations with the United States and all that sort of stuff. Like, I don't know. It's not something I think the regular or anyone should really be involved with. So to see an NBA superstar that theoretically could have been on the Wolves and involved with it, and when like his market had millions of dollars, the Where Will Giannis Play market had millions of dollars involved with it. Yeah, really tough stuff. But let's close out our pod here with the 2 words segment. My 2 words for the Wolves is time off. I think we all can understand, like with family or friends, like if you, obviously we absolutely love being around our family and friends, but it's just like, there comes a point where it's just like, I need like a day. I need to get away from you. I love you guys, but like, just please stay away from me. I think we all have experienced that. And so I think the hope is that just getting everyone away from each other for like a week, everyone go spend times with their family, their wives, their girlfriends, go sit on a beach, and go to LA and play a meaningless whatever the heck that I'm not even I don't know about you. I'm not going to watch a single second of I'm sure I'll see the clips online. Maybe I'll go watch the 3-point shot. That seems like to be the purest event. Although Dame shooting in the 3-point contest is insane, but whatever. I think the hope is that just getting everyone away from each other after months apart or together, you come back All-Star break and you hit the ground running, kind of similar to what they did last year. But for now, I think some time off could do this team well.
Yeah, I think I'm too traumatized from watching Lindsey Vonn smash her leg up, trying to come back too early from an injury, to watch Damian Lillard shoot a bunch of 3-point shots. So I'm cool
although
off that.
I think downhill skiing is a bit more dangerous than throwing up a few shots at the gym.
Like maybe I'm too old, Ryan. Maybe that's just a sign of the times for me. Whereas I'm not looking forward to any potential risk of an injury. But regardless, yeah, I'm not that excited about the All-Star break either. I'm definitely not watching Jackson Hayes dunk the ball. But
an hour into this podcast, I will give a shout out to the USA curling team. My cousin's wife is on the a member of the women's curling team, and they're the mixed doubles, which is a separate team. They won the semifinal match, so they're guaranteed a medal. And tomorrow morning, U.S. time, they play the gold medal match, the mixed doubles team. So shout out that team. I forget their last names, but they're both the man and the woman are named Corey. And then the Team Peterson for the women's curlers, or we're hoping for a family medal coming back to Minnesota. But
yeah, that's pretty awesome. That's pretty cool. I think right now I'm looking at the DraftKings betting odds for curling, right? And I'm just kidding. No, I'm not betting on that.
It exists.
Sure,
it unfortunately
exists. I'm sure it exists. Yeah, I will not be betting on that. So, but definitely hoping for the best that you guys come back and we can get some notoriety on 2 words, Olympic medal over here. So now my 2 words, scary hours. This certainly feels like a time where the future of this iteration of the Wolves, I feel like, is being determined. Can they band back together like they have the past 16 months multiple times? Or is this finally the beginning of the end? Like Ryan was saying, this is the beginning of the end of the Finch era, of the Gobert era, of the Randall era, whatever it is. Is this, are they going to start turning it down after this season, depending on where they're going? And, if history, gives you any type of pattern or anything to predict, it would be that the Wolves probably are bouncing back. They're probably going to rip off a couple wins here. So, scary hours. But yes, I agree with Ryan. Also get some time off. Just take a break from the Wolves. Hopefully Ant will preserve himself. If he doesn't play in the All-Star game, I think that will be a win for the Wolves. Like he mentioned after, I think it was the Pelicans game where he said he's not sure if he's going to play. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Wolves got the All-Star break after Wednesday's game against Portland. This podcast will take the break with the team, just this episode this week, as I'm on vacation out here at my family's place in Arizona. Certainly not really interested in doing an All-Star break or an All-Star game recap, but Leo and I will be back sometime next week to kind of preview the post All-Star break section for the Wolves, and then hopefully couple months down the line, some playoff series after that. But yeah, for Leo, I'm Ryan. Thank you everyone for listening.
Get home and drive safe.
Go Wolves.
Hey, you.